Once you begin to question everything you have been told your whole life, you begin to follow a path that takes you down many rabbit holes. Eventually, you come to the realization that this world is really run by a group of elites who worship Lucifer. For example, Freemasonry, which is connected to the founding of the nation, was explained to be Luciferian by Albert Pike and others. And the Federal Reserve is a foreign bank controlled by the banking cartel that goes all the way back to the Knights Templar. Former Dutch banker Ronald Bernard alleged that ritualistic child sacrifices were practiced among the upper echelons of the financial world. Bernard said that individuals from the upper levels of the financial world, with whom he acknowledged having contact, largely adhered to what he described as Luciferian beliefs. You can say religion is a fairy tale. God doesn't exist. None of that is real. Well, for these people, it is truth and reality, and they served something immaterial, what they called Lucifer, he explained. So to make a long story short, any truther that is worth their salt will come to the conclusion that the people who really control everything, including the government, are Luciferian. So you might not believe in God, but the people who really run this world sure do, and they have rejected him for Lucifer. I assume that Brian from Disturbing the Illusion knows all this, so I hope going forward he will preface his thoughts on religion with what the elites believe, to put this all in context.
So this is my retort to his recent video on the subject. Brian is outwardly a proponent of free speech and often makes reaction videos to other channels, so I assume he will not have any issues with me doing the same thing right now. And without further ado, here we go.
People call me of the devil because I don't subscribe to their religion or whatever. And I'm like, gosh, that's a little harsh. It's a little drastic.
Well, you're basically preaching against people believing in God. So with all due respect, what else would you call it?
But then I'm thinking, okay, Brian, come to God, come to Jesus. And I'm like, okay, but like the Muslims tell me, come to Allah. And the Buddhists go, you don't need that stuff. Just enter nirvana or meditation, a meditative state. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are like, no, we're the only ones. And the Mormons are like, no, we're the only ones. And then within the body of Christianity, there's the Church of Christ. And they're like, the Baptists are absolutely going to hell. And the Baptists are like, the Church of Christ, they're not even saved because they believe to get saved, you have to be baptized. And then you got the Catholics going, no, we're the only church and you need to be worshiping Mary. So when people are like, turn to God, I'm like, which one? That's so confusing.
I don't think you're confused about this at all, Brian. You come across like someone who is self-assured about everything you say. So this to me feels a bit like you're being intellectually disingenuous. It seems more like you're trying to get into the mindset of what you imagine some people think who are on the fence and who are unsure about God. I think your statement about how you honestly don't know to also be incongruent with the amount of research you have put into this and how convicted you obviously really are against the belief in God. Also, there can only be one truth, and there is only one true God. It doesn't matter how many wrong choices there are. This is, and of itself, not proof that God isn't real. And if you were supposedly a Christian before, but now you are anti-Christian, that only shows that you never really had the Holy Spirit to begin with. So that means you are preaching the word when you never really believed it yourself. This implies that you have a pattern of being disingenuous with people. So why should anyone believe you right now?
Because everybody who's got God, I mean, that like are really believing the Bible, or they think they are, they always got some word of condemnation for people who aren't in their group.
Is that like the words of condemnation that you have for believers? For example, I believe one of the words you used to characterize believers was quote unquote crazy a little bit later in this video.
I truly do not know.
Well, for someone who supposedly in their mind does not know, you sure seem convicted to me when it comes to listing your reasons as to why people should not believe in God. And if you really thought you didn't know, then why do you never provide examples from the other point of view that could be used to prove God's existence, such as biblical prophecy, for example? So I do not believe that in your mind that you think that you don't know.
I don't know. And I don't know if Jesus really existed,
Okay, so that right there tells me Brian has studied this subject in depth. This is an old attack on Christ that's been debated about for quite some time. There's plenty of evidence out there that substantiates that Jesus existed. I'm sure Brian knows this. So to me, this just shows how much time he's devoted to this subject. So don't be fooled by him trying to act coy by saying he does not know. He's trying to protect himself from losing viewers while taking pot shots at God at the same time. That's all that is. I don't buy him pretending this is a cerebral argument at all. My hunch is that this is coming from a place of emotion. And my gut feeling on this is that Brian has some personal issue with religion regarding something that happened in his past. But that is purely speculative on my part. Just a gut feeling.
I know what the King James Bible says, but what happened before 1611? You know? And even if it was written like in 100 AD or 50 years after Jesus supposedly died, how do you trust that?
It's called faith, Brian. And as far as the King James Bible goes, it's an English translation. You and I both know that there are copies of the Bible in the Greek Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this argument assumes ignorance on the part of the viewer in order for it to work. So that leads to two possibilities. Either Brian is unaware of the history of what he is talking about, in which case this should make the viewer question the validity of his entire argument, or two, Brian is being intentionally deceptive. And if it is the latter, then what could be his motive? Since he has nothing to gain from this in terms of new subscribers, then one can only assume that I was correct in my initial deduction that Brian must have personal issues with his past experiences with religion.
I don't even trust the evening news. And it's supposedly this event just happened a couple hours ago. But I'm supposed to believe something from like 2,000 years ago?
This last statement is ironic. The news is intentionally deceptive, and the media is tied to the Luciferian system that runs Hollywood and the music industry. So even Brian would admit that the news is connected to the CIA via Operation Mockingbird, and the CIA was connected to the Finders cult and their satanic rituals. So this is the exact opposite of Christ. But if we take Brian at his word, then how can we trust that, say, Julius Caesar ever existed? For that matter, how can we trust anything about anything? And how do we know that we are not actually in a matrix? So how can we ever know anything? This is what Brian's logic leads to.
And then they're like, no, you got to slaughter the lamb. No, the only way you can be saved is if this guy right here, this one guy got slaughtered and spilled his blood. It's like, we're talking human sacrifice?
Then you bring up human sacrifice in regards to the crucifixion. But you conveniently forget it was the non-believers who sacrificed Jesus, not his own followers. So the people who sacrificed Jesus would have been non-believers, just like you. Are you still disgusted by that? That's a pretty fundamental aspect of Christianity that you are missing there, Brian. So you seem pretty judgmental for someone who doesn't even understand what they're judging.
And then you get the Catholics with transubstantiation. It's like, you mean and they describe transubstantiation as no, the bread actually becomes the flesh of Christ and the wine actually becomes the blood of Christ. And you're like, so you're cannibals. No, we're not cannibals. You just said that you're eating the flesh and drinking the blood of a man. That's cannibalism. I mean, even if it isn't practically cannibalism because you're not actually eating flesh or drinking blood, you believe you are, and that's cannibalism. So it's just crazy, man.
So earlier in this video, you derided Christians for making disparaging comments about other denominations. But then you do the exact same thing by calling Catholics, quote unquote, crazy. This is just another hole in your argument. Then you talk about cannibalism in a disdainful way, and I am by no means condoning cannibalism, but just to follow your own logic in your argument, you said you honestly didn't know. Then using your own words, how would you know if cannibalism was or was not divine? I'm only using this example to point out that your logic does not hold up. Now, I'm not a Catholic, but regarding the Last Supper, I believe what Christ was saying was to remember him in everything that you do. Since Jesus was God in the flesh, this physical world was metaphorically his physical body in the sense that our bodies are also physical, even though we have a non-physical spirit. So sometimes people focus on the physical world and forget about the spirit. This is one of the reasons why fasting is so important. So the point is to not forget where your food really comes from.
Just be honest. Like, just be honest with how you feel.
Just be honest? Seriously? Oh, that's funny.
Don't let somebody railroad you into some religion.
You mean like someone railroading you into atheism? Like that?
What if you never knew a word of the Bible, but you were just a good person? It's like, dude, I want that guy to be my neighbor. This guy's so, like, you know, it's not that you never have a bad day, but it's like, he's so joyful. He's so thankful. He's so giving. What a great guy. Does he go to your church? No. Oh, he's evil. He's of the devil. That doesn't compute. I don't get that, man.
So what you're trying to convince people of is that good people should not go to hell if they do not accept Christ into their life. And my answer to that is 1, everyone has sin in them. So there are no purely good people. 2, you're about is good deeds, because a person who is truly good, as you described it, Brian, would also have good deeds to reflect the good that they have within themselves. So you cannot make it to salvation based upon good deeds alone, because our good deeds are like filthy rags to God. And people like that do not make it to heaven, because then they could only boast about what they did instead of bringing glory to the Most High.
Yeah, that would be good, but that's not all of it. Cause like he's coming back with a white robe with a sword and he's striking down the nations. There's like so much violence that comes with his second coming.
Brian, you mentioned the violence that comes with the second coming of Christ. But by that token, then you should not be an atheist, because more people have been killed by atheists such as Joseph Stalin than were ever killed by anyone else in the name of God. Also, you seem to be an advocate for gun rights and the Second Amendment. So I guess gun violence is okay with you, but you still don't seem to mind your own cognitive dissonance when it comes to God. Is that correct?
And then I really want to drill down because I want to find out the genesis for why they believe what they believe. Because if you were born in, let's say, Spain or Rome, you're 95% likely to be a Catholic. If you were born in some place in China, you're probably destined to be a Buddhist. If you were born someplace in Iran or somewhere in the Middle East, you're either, part of Judaism or you're a Muslim and you're following Islam, which means, by the way, to submit. So if you're likely to have that upbringing of that particular religion, it's likely that you will carry that through your death without even. A lot of people just never question it. They're immersed in it. They were brought up around it. They're constantly taught it. They're constantly going to the mosque or the mausoleum or the church or the shrine. That's all they knew. And they don't even think to question it because it's like putting on your pants. That's just what we do. We just go to church. We just go to mosque. We just go to the shrine. We just pray 5 times a day. The call to prayer, we always respond to it because that's just what we do.
Okay. So just because you don't believe in God, you just assume that everyone else that does believe in God are just mindless idiots who are just going to church because of the culture that is around them is influencing them to do so? Like believers are incapable of critical thinking. Yeah, I'm not going to lie, that's pretty darn arrogant. It's a very arrogant thing to say, Brian. But since you brought it up, let's go there. So how does that explain how Christianity spread to the West in the first place? Europe was pagan before Christianity was brought there. So by your logic, Europe should still be pagan because that's what they grew up with. And you mentioned the news earlier. Well, the media is against Christianity. It's connected to everything else, like, for example, Hollywood or the music industry and the government, etc. So that is why so many people flocked to see The Passion of the Christ years ago. They were tired of Hollywood bashing Christians. So I would say that people coming to Christ now are not doing so because of pressure from Western culture. In fact, I would say just the opposite, that what they're doing by coming to Christianity now is doing so in spite of Western culture, not because of it. So an argument could be made that if anyone is thoughtlessly following the culture of today in Western civilization, it would be unbelievers like you and not the other way around, because that's what the culture is promoting people to do right now. And what about the rise of Christianity in places like China? Why do they risk everything by not caving into the cultural demands of that communist regime? And there are other examples around the world. So once again, your logic does not hold up. But I would encourage everyone to pray for you nonetheless, Brian.